Hey guys, this is lesson 2.3 quadratic functions, and we are getting into standard form. So vocabulary here, we're going to be kind of building in because I kind of can't teach you the lessons and the vocabulary separately. They all kind of go hand in hand. But by the end of this, you need to be able to organize into standard form, recognize a quadratic function, and identify our parts. So first thing we need to do is we need to recognize how to organize a polynomial into standard form. Now we're going to talk broadly about polynomials in standard form, but then get down specifically to quadratics. So let's take a look. So if I need a polynomial in standard form, I need to first simplify the expression, and then I need to make sure that the terms are ordered from largest degree to the lowest degree. When we're figuring out the degree of a term, we're going to be looking at the exponent. So let's take a look. All right, so with our first example here, I'm looking at this expression. I'm noticing, okay, I need to simplify. Well, it looks like I can combine. I don't see anything else I can combine, but I do know that that's going to be negative 6 plus 5 is going to be negative 1x, or just negative x. Now, at the same time, I can go ahead and start putting this in order. So if I'm looking at my problem, I would have like 7x to the third. There's my minus x plus 8 minus 3x squared. So I need to notice, again, my exponents. So I've got to the third. This would be x to the first. This has no x, so this is technically like x to the 0. And then this is x squared. So I need to put this in order from largest to smallest. So real quick, let's make sure we understand. So notice how we went from 3, 2. Technically there's a 1 here, and technically this would be x to the 0 since nothing exists here. Obviously we don't need to write that, but again, making sure we know how to put it in order from largest to smallest exponent. All right, let's try one more. Looking at this, that can combine. That would be a negative x squared. And notice this can combine. That would be a plus 4. Now double, triple check. Make sure we are in order. This would be x squared. Then there's no x term, but that's okay. I've got x to the 0 here because, again, that's my constant. So negative x squared plus 4, that's my final answer. So again, making sure that we're in standard form. All right, now let's take it up a notch. Organizing in standard form, but this time I'm going to have some equations. So with an equation, we have to make sure it's set equal to 0. Now remember, if I'm moving a value from one side of the equation to the other, I need to use inverse operations. So let's take a first look at our first example here. So notice I have my equal sign, and that should help me see the left side and the right side to my equation. So let's go ahead and move. Let's make the right side equal to 0. So how do I move 2x squared to the other side? Well, this one's a positive. So I'm going to do minus 2x squared. What I do to one side, I do to the other. Notice I'm going to go ahead and put it underneath this other x squared term because I need to be able to combine like terms. All right, I then need to move positive 21, so that would be minus 21. I'm going to put that under the 10 because again, those are the same terms. So negative 2x squared minus 2x squared, that would be 0. Negative 21 plus 21, that would also be 0. Notice here I have 2x squared minus 2x squared, that would actually also be 0. This minus 3x can just come on down. And then negative 21 plus 10, that's going to be negative 11. So notice how I'm set equal to 0. And notice how I'm in order. I've got x to the first. And then this 11 is my constant. Negative 11 is my constant. And so technically that would be like x to the 0, but I don't need to write that. All right, let's try one more. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move 2x to the other side. I'm going to go ahead and put that underneath the negative 6x, because again, I need to make sure I'm combining like terms. All right, 2x minus 2x, that was going to be equal to 0. This negative 7 can just come on down. That's going to be negative 6, 7, 8x. And this x squared can come on down. And again, that should already be in standard form because I've got x squared. Then that would be x to the first, and then no x. All right, so level 1, standard form. Now making sure, again, this is a little bit of review, but making sure that we could recognize. So we have got that standard or that general form. Remember that this is going to have your A, your B, your C. We're going to talk about that a little bit more today. And so notice how my largest, again, exponent is at 2. It can have other x's or even no x's. But again, your largest exponent needs to be at 2. You've got that vertex form, which is also called transformation form. Notice again, my largest exponent here is a 2. Now, intercept form, kind of a little bit different. Looks a little bit different because we've got 2 sets of parentheses. But notice I have an x and I have an x. And notice there's no sign in between my parentheses. So that means technically I'm multiplying x times x. Remember that x times x is x squared. So that's why this is still a quadratic, because x times x is x squared. Notice some of these that are not a quadratic. So notice here how I'd have x times x times x. That'd be x cubed. That's not a quadratic, that's actually a cubic. Same thing here, I've got an exponent of a 3. That's going to also be a cubic. Again, I've got this x squared, but that's not my largest exponent. My largest exponent here is this cubed. Now this one, my largest exponent is just an x. That would be x to the first. That's actually a linear function. So again, making sure that we are recognizing a quadratic. And now getting to the parts. So starting to put things together. So we need to be able to put a quadratic function into standard form. And then we need to be able to recognize the parts of it. So what do I mean by parts? Well, the coefficient of x squared, whatever that number is in front, that's what we call our a. So again, there's going to be a number in front of x squared, and that's called our a. There's going to be a number in front of x, and that is called our b. So again, the coefficient of x is b. And again, sometimes this one is missing, and that's okay. So sometimes missing. But you for sure have to have this x squared. You will always have that x squared, because if not, it won't be a quadratic. All right, and then last but not least, the constant is called a c. So remember, your c is your constant, and that has no x with it. because again, it's a constant. So again, we're paying attention to numbers, and these numbers have specific placements to know what to call them, A, B, or C. So let's take a look at an example. So our first example, I've got 3x squared plus x minus 2. So if I need to find my A, remember that my A is going to be in front of x squared. So here's my x squared. So the number that's in front is 3. So I know my A is equal to 3. My B is going to be the number in front of x. So here's my x. And the number in front, well, there's no number in front. I can assume it's a 1. So our B is equal to 1. Now, careful with C here. C has no x value. It's your constant. But it's not just a 2. It's a negative 2. So C is equal to negative 2. All right, let's look at one more with a little bit of variety to it. So remember I said that you will always have an A, but sometimes a B or a C is missing. So looking at this one something's missing, and that's okay. So let's look at it. So first off, let's find our A. Our A is in front of x squared. So here's my x squared. There's my 9. So A is equal to 9. Now I'm looking for my B. B is normally in front of x. But oh no, there's no x term. So what does it mean if there's no x term? That means my B is 0. Because again, if there's no B, then my B is literally 0. And that's okay, it happens. All right, let's look for C. C should be a number with no x value. I got it. Negative 25. So again, sometimes you're going to have a missing B. Sometimes you'll technically have a missing C, but you'll always have an A. So again, when you identify A, B, and C, make sure you're looking at the variables and seeing what's in front, or when it comes to C, no variable. All right, and then last thing we need to be able to identify from our standard form is we need to identify our y-intercept. Now your y-intercept, hopefully you already know your y-intercept is where your graph is touching the y-axis. Now, hopefully we know that when we're finding our y-intercept, we need to make sure we make x equal to 0. And if you're kind of confused why, mainly you just have to kind of think about graphing. If your x was a negative number, your point would be to the left of the y-axis. If your x was a positive number, it would be to the right of the y-axis. Your x value has to be 0, aka like neutral, for your point to actually be on the y-axis. So if we know that your x is equal to 0, then we can figure out y. Now for a quadratic, let's see what that does. So for example, for my first problem, if I say x is equal to 0, because again I want to solve for y, I would have 3 squared plus parentheses minus 2. Because again, I'm looking at my x's right here in these parentheses. Okay, so if we say 0 and 0 here, well, 0 squared is 0, and 3 times 0 is still just 0. Plus 0 minus 2. Well, 0 plus 0 minus 2, that's just going to be negative 2. So we would say that when x is equal to 0, my result is negative 2. And that's partially because if I were to take this quadratic and graph it, I would put a y in front of it. So this point right here is my y-intercept. Now notice this negative 2 that we got, that's literally your c value. Because again, if x is 0, these terms will always eliminate themselves. So a shortcut to know your y-intercept is just to say, oh, well, know that your x is always 0 and your y is always your c value. So if you remember that, you can get this done really quickly. If you don't remember that, then you kind of have to go through some extra steps. So let's look at this other one. So at this other one, if I can recognize, okay, my 9 is A, and my B, again, we said was 0, and my C is negative 25, well, ding, 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 now I know my y-intercept. So my y-intercept should be, again, x is always 0 for my y-intercept, and then negative 25. Done. All right, make sure to practice, make sure to ask your teacher questions, and have a great one.